welcome to December the 6th and the 6th of our Super-Snappy Advent Drill Downs. I've got Tex with me again today because The Wizard of Oz, which is the book from which this extract is taken, is one of Tex's favourite books. Interesting. Let's read. Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies with Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em, who was the farmer's wife. Their house was small, for the lumber to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. We've got 4 questions. Let's get answering. Question 1. Where did Dorothy live? Look at the first line of the passage. Where did Dorothy live? Exactly, in the midst of the great Kansas prairies. Now, you may not know what the great Kansas prairies are, but you do know that Dorothy lived there, so that is your answer. We'll go back to explaining what that is at the end. Question 2. Why was their house small? Look at the second sentence, the beginning of the second sentence. It tells us. For the lumber to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. Do you remember we talked, I think it was yesterday, about how for and because are interchangeable. So it's their house was small because the lumber to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. Again, you may not know what lumber is, but you do know that that's the answer because it says their house was small for or because, and it tells us that the lumber to build it had to be carried for many miles. Question 3. Find a word in the passage that means the same as would. This is potentially more tricky. So let's look at the words in the passage and maybe the ones you're less sure of to start with. I would posit that prairies and lumber are the 2 words that you're less sure of. Am I right? Well, let's try and put the word would in place of, first of all, prairies and then lumber and see how it sounds. Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas wood. Does that sound like a possibility? It does actually, not if you know what the great Kansas prairies are, but just from the sense of the words in the sentence. However, I do notice that wood is singular and prairies is plural, so it's not a direct match for me. Shall we now see how wood sounds in the place of lumber? The house was small, for the wood to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. That's interesting. So that is a singular noun and lumber is a singular noun. So that's a better fit. What about the sense of it? For the wood to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. Can houses be made of wood? Yes, they can. So that for me is a better fit. Now let's go back to the great Kansas prairies and let's look for more clues. So Uncle Henry, what's his job? I know you know. Yeah, it tells us he's a farmer. Now, what is farmland usually like? Yeah, flat, exactly. Now, there probably aren't that many trees on farmland, would you agree? So we know that probably if they're living on a land where there aren't that many trees because it's farmland, there's another clue that the wood has to be carried for many miles. Question 4. How can we infer that Dorothy's parents are no longer alive, that she's an orphan? What are the clues? Her parents aren't mentioned, but there are clues to suggest that she may be an orphan. She's living with her aunt and uncle, and that would suggest that her parents can't look after, and so the first assumption might be that they have died. Amazing. Well done, you. We are finished. Tex is saying, do go back to December the 6th last year and listen to the first couple of chapters which we read, because he really rates this book. Yes, I suppose he imagines himself running around those Kansas prairies, those grasslands, kicking back his hoofs. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Well done you, and we will see you tomorrow for an extract from The Firework Maker's Daughter. Now that is one of my favourite books. See you then.